back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Jonah and you're watching The Bottomless Appetite. In today's video, I'll be showing you a very easy recipe for barbacoa or shredded beef. If you're not familiar with barbacoa, it is a recipe that is originated from Mexico. Traditionally, barbacoa is made by taking the entire cow head, burying it in the ground, well, wrapping it in agave leaves first, burying it in the ground to cook, and then taking it out, unwrapping the leaves, shredding the meat from the skull, resulting in a very tender and delicious shredded beef. Unfortunately, I'm not gonna be burying anything in the ground, but what I will be doing is taking the cheek of the cow and searing it on the stove to give it a little bit of color and some char, and then making a homemade sauce, and then we're going to be putting it into the crock pot to cook so it results in a very tender and delicious dish for tacos or whatever you would like. So I really love using the crock pot because it makes it really easy for recipes like this, because what you'll ultimately be doing is just taking everything, throwing it inside the crock pot, and leaving it and letting it work its magic. On the crock pot for recipes like this is really great for if you are really busy, if you don't have that much time on your hands, or if you're at a time like we are in right now and you're just sitting at your house all day. You can just throw everything in the crock pot and have a dish that you can use for leftovers to come. So if y'all are ready for this recipe for foolproof homemade barbacoa, keep on watching. Alright guys, so here we have all of our ingredients that you'll need for the sauce. Alright, so what you need are 2 tablespoons of mesquite liquid smoke, 2 tablespoons of dried thyme, 2 tablespoons of dried oregano, 2 tablespoons of dried cilantro, 2 teaspoons of beef bouillon, 2 tablespoons of onion powder, 2 tablespoons of garlic powder, 2 tablespoons of Mexican chili powder, 1 tablespoon of packed brown sugar, and 2 bay leaves that I just chopped up. You also need 2 halves of a lime, 1 for the sauce and 1 other half for the meat. Then 1 whole onion, 3/4 for the sauce, and 1/4 for the crock pot to cook. Alright guys, so what you see here is that I have the meat that we're using. This is a beef cheek meat. It's a very fatty piece of meat. I'm just opening it up and then I'm gonna rinse it off under some cool water. Yep, we're giving this beef a good old rinse. It has a lot of little crevices and little corners of the fat. I just want to get that cool water to just go in and make sure that it's all clean. And I'm throwing away all the packages for it. I'm going to give it one more good rinse on all of the pieces of the meat. Alright, so I took my cutting board, put it in the sink so we could get this beef cut up into more manageable pieces. Then I took that half of lime that I told you all about, and I'm just going to squeeze it around the pieces of meat. And then I'm taking 2 tablespoons of that mesquite liquid smoke. I'm just going to pour it all over the meat. Now this is 2 tablespoons aside from the other 2 that we're going to use for the sauce. I'm taking 2 tablespoons of salt-free Mrs. Dash table blend seasoning, and I'm putting that on both sides of the beef and mixing it around, making sure to rub it in on all sides and corners of the beef. Alright guys, so our beef cheek meat is all seasoned. Next, we're going to go over to our stove. I have a pot on my stove. I sprayed a little bit of cooking spray. And next, I'm going to take a little bit of some olive oil and pour it all inside the pot. This pot is on medium high. We need like a nice amount of heat so that we could sear our beef. If you want to be a little bit generous with the oil that you're going to use. Next, I'm taking the beef that we have here. It's all nicely seasoned. So I'm going to be adding the beef now into our pot so we can get a nice sear on all of the meat. The pot's on a nice high heat so it can get some good color on all sides of the beef. Just know that when you put your beef onto the stove, it's going to be colorful and nicely charred on all the outsides of the beef, but on the inside it's not going to be cooked. That's good for what we're doing because we're going to be putting it inside the crock pot so that it can slow cook and get really tender. You'll see here I'm taking some black pepper and I'm going to put some of that coarse black pepper on all of the sides of the beef. I'm putting a little bit of some salt as well. That's pink Himalayan sea salt. So with this, while it is in our pot, you want to make sure that you flip it like so, because we're basically just trying to brown it up a little bit before we put it into our crock pot. So as the beef is browning on the stove, we're gonna move over and grab our blender to create our sauce. So we're gonna be using two ingredients that I didn't show you before. First is some unsalted beef broth. I'm gonna be using about half of it first and pouring it into the blender, and I'm gonna pour the other half after we're all finished up. Next, I'm gonna be adding a whole can of whole chipotle chilies and adobo sauce. Pour that into the blender. Then I'm gonna take some of that beef broth, pour it inside the can to get the remainder of that adobo sauce out. Using this is gonna give the sauce a very robust and delicious flavor. Then I'm adding in our onion. So that's our diced onion that we had earlier. It's 3/4 of the onion. I'm gonna put a little bit inside first so that it can start getting blended up. All right, so you want to take that onion, the adobo sauce, the chipotle chilies, and the beef broth and make sure that it's all completely blended. And you'll see I left a little bit of the onion to put inside the crock pot. Sorry guys, but now we're gonna go over to the stove and we just need to check our beef to see how it's going. It's looking really good. We got some color on both sides. I'm making sure to flip it to get all of those little pink corners and make sure that we have some nice color and char on all of the pieces of the beef. All right, so leave the beef to sear for probably about like 5 to 6 more minutes. And we're gonna move back over to our blender to add all of our spices and herbs.
Oregano, thyme, beef bouillon, this is the chili pepper, cilantro, brown sugar, this is our liquid smoke, and our bay leaf.
So all the ingredients are getting evenly blended in the blender. Next, I'm gonna add the remainder of that 3/4 of an onion and a little bit more of the beef broth. There's a little bit left. I'm gonna put the remainder of that in the sauce after it's finished in the blender. So you wanna keep a close eye on the beef while it's on the stove. It's gonna get really smoky, but that's all right. I'm checking on it to make sure that it has all been seared on all sides. It's looking really good. So I'm gonna start pulling off some of those pieces. I'm gonna put them on my cutting board so they could breathe for a little bit. It probably needs a little bit longer. Pull that one off. So I'm actually just gonna leave that piece on for a little bit more, just to get a little brown on that one side. Okay, and then I'm gonna add some oil. Now I'm adding some olive oil around the beef, and then I'm gonna add the 1/4 of a cup of onion. That's the onion that we're gonna put inside the crock pot so that all the juices and fat from the beef can turn those onions translucent and give them some flavor before we put them inside the crock pot. After pulling off the remainder of that beef, I'm going to take all those diced onions, mix it around in those juices and charred bits, and just let them remain to get translucent. And then just pull them off the stove. So I just took out my cutting board and a knife, and then I'm going to be taking that beef. It's going to be very hot, so I'm using some tongs and taking my time. And I'm just going to chop up the beef into bigger chunks, just so that I could fit all of these pieces into my crock pot. Yep, so it is all charred on the outside and beautifully pink and rare on the inside. Now it's ready to go in the crock pot. If you've made it this far in the video, let's have a discussion in the comment section below. Let me know what's your favorite Mexican food or dish. All right, so now we're ready to finish up our sauce. I'm gonna take the sauce out of the blender and pour it into this large bowl. Pour the remainder of our beef broth. Then that other half of lime that we had from earlier. Some olive oil, just lightly drizzle a bit on top. Some salt, just a light bit of salt. And a few cracks of black pepper. Then I'm gonna add our diced onions. And about 4 bay leaves. And then I'm gonna mix all of this together, making sure that it's all evenly mixed. And that's finished up. So everything's prepped now. I'm gonna get my crock pot, plug it in, wipe it down on the inside. I'm going to turn the crock pot on high to get it heated up. Spray a little bit of vegetable oil on the inside. The crock pot is non-stick, but I just like to make sure that it doesn't stick. And now we're ready to start adding in all of our beef in the crock pot. So now I'm gonna nuzzle in all of the pieces of beef. There's no rhyme or reason for this. I just wanna get everything stuffed into the crock pot now. So now I'm gonna be taking our sauce and pouring it on our beef inside the crock pot. Make sure to mix the beef and the sauce around in the crock pot so while it's cooking, all the delicious flavors can get inside the meat and make it really juicy and tender. So now we have our charred beef and our sauce inside the crock pot. I'm gonna cover it up and it's ready to cook. Now for cooking, you have two options. You can put it on low like I'm doing. It'll cook for about 8 to 9 hours. Or if you're pressed for time, you can put it on high and it'll cook for about 6 to 7 hours. But I usually like to put it on low. Now this is gonna slow cook in the crock pot, but you wanna check it periodically. Probably about every 3 to 4 hours. You'll see here, this is at the about 4 hour mark. It's starting to bubble and cook. I'm gonna mix it around. So all that soft part that's at the top, that is all the adobo sauce. And I'm just gonna mix that around with the beef. It's looking really good, but I want it to be falling apart. So I'm gonna leave it for the remainder of the time. Alright guys, so this is how our meat looks after the 9 hours in the crock pot. It's very tender and juicy. As you can see, ready to be shredded up with the tongs, it's all falling apart on its own. That goes to show how tender and juicy it is, that we don't even have to really shred it. In this portion of the video, I'm basically taking all of the meat out of the crock pot, basically separating it away from all of the juices that we have here. I have a strainer with a bowl just so I can get a lot of that juice out. And I'll be pouring some of that juice on top just to keep it a little spicy. Since we use the chiles and adobo sauce, it has a little kick to it. I like the kick, but if you really don't like it, you can omit some of the sauce. Alright, at this portion of the video, you'll see that I have a fork and I'm picking through the meat to take out the bay leaves that we had. And here you'll see that I am adding some more of the sauce from the crock pot just to keep the meat really plump and juicy and to have a little spice to it. I'm also going to be adding a little squeeze of lemon just for the acidity that I like. And I'll be mixing it around and we're all good. All right, so after 9 hours in the crock pot, our barbacoa is finished. How I prepared it is I took some corn tortillas, toasted them on the stove, put some diced onion, and a little bit of some fresh cilantro, and a little bit of salsa verde for a little kick, and our tacos are all ready to go. I'm really excited that I shared this with you guys, and I hope this video inspired you to make some of your favorite recipes at home during this quarantine process we are at. If you could, in the comment section down below, tell me some other recipes that you would like to see, whether if it's with a crock pot or without the crock pot. Also, if you could, give this video a big like and subscribe to The Bottomless Appetite for more videos like this. All right, and until next time, happy eating.